Was I wrong about the iPhone 15? Yeah, I know that's an attention grabber, but let me explain myself here. When I started doing my coverage this year on this year's iPhones, I made some assumptions, and I gotta be honest, I've been shifting my coverage more towards the iPhone 15 Pro, or rather the iPhone 15 Pro Max, because this phone actually had a lot of real upgrades that we've never seen before on an iPhone. So you got things like the new 5x telephoto lens, you have the new titanium frame material, you have the A17 Pro chip, and yes, you even got this nice little action button right here. All new things that the iPhones never really had before. But that kind of made me not necessarily say anything bad about the iPhone 15, but not cover it as in depth as I might have with this phone getting more exciting phone upgrades. Because last year, I honestly thought the iPhone 14 was a pretty boring upgrade. I thought it might have been one of the most boring iPhone upgrades ever because it basically was the same design as the iPhone 13 with some of the guts from the iPhone 13 Pro thrown into it. So it was kind of like a Frankenstein phone, and it still had the notch and everything like that, right? It didn't even get the dynamic island. So I kind of thought the iPhone 15 was the same play, and it is kind of the same play, but there's enough differences here and enough upgrades that I wasn't expecting that really make this phone a much better value than I was expecting. And honestly, again, I was coming into this thinking I was going to be pushing people more towards, this Pro model over here. But after using this phone, I have to say, I think maybe the iPhone 15 could possibly be the right model to get. Now, one of the bad points with the iPhone 15 is it still doesn't feature a charging brick in the box, and with that new USB-C port, you gotta get on the full USB-C lifestyle with what's gotta be one of the cutest chargers I have ever seen, and that's Ugreen's RG 65-watt charger, and it's downright adorable with a tiny design that still features two USB-C ports and a USB-A port. And this cute little robot charger even has a mini smart display that lets you know the charging status in real time through cute emojis to let you know when your device is charging or when it's fully charged.
Not only is it small and adorable, but it's powerful. It can fast charge your iPhone 15 to 60% in just 30 minutes.
This is thanks to Ugreen's GaN technology, which not only makes the charging brick smaller, but makes it more efficient with 95% energy conversion, and with just one GaN chip, it reduces CO2 production by up to 8.8 pounds for smart, eco-friendly charging. To get 20% off this cute charger, click the link in the description, and thank you to Ugreen for sponsoring this video. Look at this thing, you can even stand it on your desk. That's so cool. So when you look at the design of the iPhone 15, right, it is, again, pretty similar to the iPhone 14 Pro and the iPhone 14 Pro Max if you are going for the bigger Plus model. This is the regular size model I have here. But there are differences in that design. Number one, the curvature of the iPhone 15 is different. It's slightly more rounded, just like on the 15 Pro, and that does make a difference when you're holding this phone in your hand. And because it has the aluminum frame, which is kind of similar to the titanium frame in terms of how it feels of it being matte, but it is lighter too, because the aluminum material is lighter than titanium. So I think this might be one of the most comfortable iPhones that I have ever held, especially since they switched the design on the iPhone 12. This is a very comfortable phone to hold. And then it does get some nice new upgrades from the 14. So now you do get the full screen design. You do get the dynamic island, which was one of the big features on the 14 Pro last year. And one of the big design differences between the regular 14 and the 14 Pro, well, that now comes over to the 15, so you don't really have to worry about missing out on the dynamic island. It still has its fun little uses. You get little shortcuts on it if you're new to the dynamic island. I like it a lot. But yeah, you get the same design this time, except for, I guess, one notable exception is that the bezels are a little bit smaller on the iPhone 15 Pro series. So if you really care about bezels, I guess that's there, but honestly, I really don't think it makes that big of a difference. I'll also say the design of this phone is a little bit different too from the 14 because this now has a matte glass back finish. It's kind of like soft, where the other iPhones had like a glossy back, and I much prefer this material. It feels very smooth, feels very nice. And I have to say, there was a lot of coverage on the colors of these phones. I got this one in pink, but I did see the other colors in the Apple Store. And looking at this color more closely, I gotta say, like, they are kind of muted, but the color infused glass on here is really nice. This is a really nice looking phone. I quite like the way that Apple did the colors, even if they're not bright and vibrant. There is something different about this year's colors that look really nice. If you haven't seen it in person, I would encourage you to go to an Apple store, check out the colors. I think they look way better in person than they do from the photos on Apple's website. Now, another big deciding factor I usually had going for Pro Series phones was display. And not necessarily for the 120 hertz refresh rate. I know that's like a big talking point in like the tech community at large that, oh, the Pro models have the faster refresh rate. But I have to be honest, after using this iPhone 15, you do notice the faster refresh rate, right? Like you can swipe, you can scroll, you can tell there's a difference. But after being on this phone for 10 minutes, I forget about it. My brain turns it off and everything looks normal to me. Now, if I bring up the 15 Pro, and what I really like about the display on the regular 15 is it directly matches the 15 Pro this year in terms of the quality of the OLED display. And then of course, you have the USB-C port, which is also new on the regular 15 models. This is probably the one upgrade that I don't care about. I guess now it'll be easier to charge this phone with cables I have for my MacBook or my iPad. But the reason why I don't care about the USB-C port as much on the regular 15 and I do on the Pro models is because this is a slower USB-C port. It only has USB 2.0 speeds, where the Pro model has 10 gigabit per second USB 3 speeds. And that basically means that this port is still slow. If I'm gonna transfer videos and photos off it, it's still gonna be very slow. And really, the only thing I'm really using this port for, because of that, is charging. Other than that, though, I don't really have much to say about the phone's experience because it is very similar to the iPhone 14 Pro, right? It has the same A16 chip as that device, dynamic island, like I mentioned before. It's going to perform exactly the same, which is fine, right? The A16 chip was plenty powerful on the 14 Pro. It is plenty powerful on the regular 15. Your apps are gonna load very quickly. You're gonna be able to play games, maybe not necessarily the AAA games that Apple announced at their event, but those aren't even out yet on the store, so that remains to be seen how well those perform on the 15 Pro. But in terms of like everyday functionality, yeah, this thing is still blazing fast. Like there's no problem with this using an older A16 chip. Now, what is different and what really blew me away was this camera. So when Apple did their presentation, I think they left out a lot of details, specifically on the iPhone 15 Pro camera. They were kind of a little, I don't want to use the word shady, but they weren't very forthright exactly with the specs of the iPhone 15 Pro. I believe I heard in the event even too that they were using a big sensor for the 15 Pro camera system, which led me to believe it is bigger and better than what they are giving on the regular 15. But what I think we've kind of discovered since that announcement and since we've got our hands on this phone is that the 15 Pro camera system, in terms of like the sensor size and everything, is pretty much the same as the 14 Pro. All the changes that Apple really made here was to how these camera systems take the photos with the computational photography, changing things like the resolution now being a default 24 megapixel resolution photo, changing their HDR algorithms, and just general tweaks to how these phones take photos where the 14 Pro didn't get that. And what I can kind of see from this is these camera sensors on the 15 and on the 15 Pro appear to be pretty much the same. So when you go and take a photo, they look great on both phones. The camera system on the regular 15 is really good. There's very little compromises by going for the regular 15 camera system. If you look at the main wide angle shots, I think they look exactly the same as what you can get on the iPhone 15 Pro. Funny thing about this camera system too is it's actually using a different lens than both the 14 Pro and the 15 Pro. This is actually using a 26mm focal length for the main camera, while the 15 Pro and the old 14 Pro used 24mm. So this does actually make some slight differences. I found that the minimum focus distancing on the 26mm lens on the 15 is actually superior to that of the 14 Pro. You can actually focus closer on objects. So if you're holding something in your hand, the 15 is gonna focus on it even if it's closer to the lens, whereas on the 15 Pro, if I hold it close, it's gonna look very blurry. And because this is using the 14 Pro and 15 Pro's camera system minus the zoom lens, when you use that new 2x mode, which is kind of like a cropped zoom in for the photo, the 26mm lens actually goes to 52mm, which is 4 more millimeters than the 15 Pro. So the 2x mode on here, the digital zoom feature, gets more zoomed in. So that's also like a little bit of an upgrade over even the 15 Pro system. Now, it doesn't have its own dedicated zoom lens, but because of that, the 2x zoom does give you farther reach. So if you were comparing this against like the 15 Pro Max that has the 5x zoom, you're technically going to get a little bit better zoom range between 1x and 5x on a regular 15 than you would on the 15 Pro. But other than those small differences, the main camera on the iPhone 15 seems to be the same as the 15 Pro, with one small caveat. And that is that you don't get the full control of software features that you could on the 15 Pro. And this is not a limitation of the software or the A16 chip, because the iPhone 14 Pro could use those features as well, but the regular 15 can't. And I think that's more of a philosophical choice by Apple, where they realize that if you're like into like pro photography or pro videography, you are probably going to buy an iPhone 15 Pro. But the normal user, they are not really going to miss those features. And the features I'm talking about are Apple's Pro RAW photo mode, which is basically letting you get a full 48 megapixel readout of the sensor and giving you a lot more data. So it's about a 70 megabyte file. And then the real benefits of that is because you get more data, you can bring that into a photo editing app. And then when you're tweaking that photo, you get more control over how that photo looks. It's not necessarily going to be a better photo than the standard photo you get out of the iPhone, but it gives you more control on how you want that photo to look. Now, don't worry, if you want a full 48 megapixel photo on the iPhone 15, you could actually go into settings and use this new setting called HEIF Max, which does give you a full 48 megapixel readout, but it's still a compressed photo file. It's not giving you the full data like it would on the Pro RAW mode found on the 15 Pro. So there might be some more limitations in how you can get that photo to look when you're editing it in a photo application. The other big one is ProRes video, and especially ProRes log video that's now on the 15 Pro. So normal video quality still looks great, still has basically the same specs, right? 4K at 60 frames per second, but you don't get access to the additional setting to turn on ProRes. Now, ProRes takes up a lot of storage. It's a feature normal consumers are probably never going to use, and normal consumers would never benefit from that feature because that, again, is something you have to take into a video editing app, and then you kind of have to know what you're doing with that video file to really tweak it and really make it look good. Here's log footage from the iPhone 15 Pro. You can see by default, it's washed out, it looks awful, but then if you start to grade it, well, you can start to make it look good, especially if you know what you're doing. I don't really know what I'm doing too well, but yeah, you can kind of see the difference between the log file and a regular video file from the iPhone 15. So basically, whether you agree with Apple or not, they are limiting those software features on the regular iPhone 15 model, probably because they don't want the end user to get confused with all these features. Should they enable these Pro modes on the regular 15? I think so, because the device is capable of doing it. These are features you have to go into settings anyway and check off on the 15 Pro if you want to use them. So the people who are hunting for these settings obviously know they want to use them. So I feel like, why not include it on the regular 15? But that's just me, right? But this is Apple's philosophy not to include it. And they're probably right. Like the main audience buying the iPhone 15, they aren't really going to be missing these features. But my big takeaway here is this iPhone 15 with this excellent camera system, which is pretty much the same as the 15 Pro, like the main 24 megapixel shots that you get on this camera look amazing to me. I love the increase in resolution on the normal photos. Last year on the 14 Pro, even though it had the 48 megapixel sensor, it was bidding them down to 12 megapixels. Now they're bidding them down to 24 megapixels. That's double the resolution. It's a really nice compromise here with the computational photography feature, where you're getting even more resolution, you're getting better HDR, and the photos, I think, just look really good on this system. So yeah, the iPhone 15, it really did surprise me. I was kind of not really giving this phone the time it deserved. This is an excellent phone. I have no problem really recommending it. If you got this phone, you made a smart choice. All right, that's my video on the iPhone 15. If you liked it, make sure you give me a like. If you want to see more, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you want to see a direct comparison too, really between the iPhone 15 Pro and this iPhone 15, let me know in the comments below. And also, if you want to get this cool wallpaper that you've seen in the video on both phones, look at it in pink, looks so good. There's a link to that in the description below, of course. All right, thanks for watching again. I'll see you in the next one.